look as though you're speaking to someone else? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Is he going to be asking questions?
Sure will, and that is right where he'll be looking. Okay, thank you. Okay. You remember when you were, when Alice Cornelissen interviewed you for her book, don't you, a couple of years ago?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, that's essentially what I'm doing now is I'm just making the video version of her book. It came to us and asked, said, could you do this? And we said, yeah, we could do that.
I should have asked you what questions are you going to ask before I came here today.
That takes the spontaneity out of it, but to tell you the truth, I'm virtually going to ask you virtually the same question she asked you, because I want the documentary of this to deal with the same information that the book dealt with. And since the same questions I'm going to ask today were the content of the book, it's all pretty much the same. Let me just make one slight adjustment in lighting. This is hard to do when we both have to run around. So
I know. That's all right.
A little more headroom, Jim? Sure. That's way too little. Here we go. This is your frame if you have any reference. I'll just use my monitor. I don't know what that is over there. Okay, just give me just a hand. That's good. Okay. So basically what we're going to be talking about is going to probably concentrate most on what you remember as a little girl. What you remember from the early days of the county. Now you're a lifelong resident right now.
I was born in Howard County. In fact, I was born not too far from where I live, in the Guilford area.
Is that right? Now both of you. I'm pretty much going to try to stay quiet through this whole thing, so don't be afraid to expound upon any answers. I believe your folks were all full-time county residents too, weren't they?
Yes, my mother and father were both born in Howard County. Not too far from where I live now. They were both born there. One was born in Guilford area, that's where I live, and the other one was born in the Asbury area. I don't know whether you're familiar with Asbury or not, but that's where she was born.
Asbury Methodist Church.
Right, that's the church she came up in as a little girl.
Is that right?
And my father, we came up in the same church that my father came up in, and that was the First Baptist Church of Guilford. It has really grown since that time. It was just a little small building. Then it ended up another building, and we're in the fourth building now. And it's a huge, we have 700-800 people that are members of it now. Started off with about 15 people as members of the church.
Now, when you were a little girl, was that your church too?
That was my church, yes.
And are you still a member?
And I'm still a member of that church. Gone from one church to another, 4 churches, but I'm still a member of that church.
Tell me, in a sort of generic sense, how important was the church personally to you in your life as a youngster and heck as an adult, but all through your life? And not only that, but at the same time, can you reflect for me how important you feel the church as an institution is to the entire black community?
The church is very, very important to the black community. In fact, that's where most of us originated from as far as programs and activities and services are concerned. We, a number of the people that belonged to the churches, would help each other out if they needed food, clothes, or whatever came up in the church. That's the way we came up. In fact, as a little girl, my mother used to always say, I took my children to church before they were born. And she did. And she would take us and she would sit us on the front seat, and we would all be sitting on the front seat. She had 10 children. They all weren't there at the same time, because I had one sister that died kind of young. She was 5 years old. But all the others, she sat us on the front seat. And so the church was very, very important.
Why the church? Why did that become sort of the natural place to congregate and to get things organized from?
Because there wasn't any other kind of community building or community activity center other than the church until the schools. And of course, by the time we started in school, that was a different story altogether. We had PTAs, and the PTAs would sponsor programs, and then the parents would get involved with PTA programs. In fact, that's how I became interested in PTA, and I'm still in the PTA. My son, I joined PTA when my son was a little boy. After that, and even my grandson came to live with me. I'm still in PTA. I'm still in PTA now. I'm parliamentarian for the Guilford Elementary School PTA and a historian for the PTA Council, which includes all of the PTAs in Howard County.
Oh, wonderful. Then speaking of PTA, were you around for the early days when Silas Craft sort of helped get things going?
I was around here before Silas Craft. I was born here, yes.
Right, okay.
And Silas came in the 40s.
Tell me about...
And I was born before then. Not much before 40.
No, of course not. Tell me about Silas Craft and what he did for education in this county.
Well, when Silas Craft came into the county, for instance, we had an NAACP, but they were not functioning at the time that he came in. He came in 45. We were organized in 44. And he came in 45, and he said, do you all have an NAACP in the county? And I said, well, we had it, but it is not active now. And he said, okay, let's start it up again. So we did, and I became the president at that time. I was the second president of the NAACP since it organized in 1944.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. And Silas Craft, after he came into the county, we organized a county-wide PTA. And this included parents from all over the county. It was a county-wide thing. And he did a tremendous job in getting this particular PTA organized, which was a county thing, as I said. And we had programs, and we had activities, and we had all kinds of things. So Silas Craft really did get things jumping when he came into the county. I give him a lot of credit for a lot of things that that happened.
What was it about Silas Craft that he could organize people so effectively? What is it about his character that...
Well, he is a person that gets things done. And if you didn't want to do it, he'd get somebody else to do it. He was very aggressive kind of a person. Either you do or you don't. And if you didn't do it, he would. When Silas first came into the county, he didn't have a car. And he was walking a lot of times. And my husband and I would pick him up a lot of times along the road and carry him to meetings. He was a very punctual person, and he liked to be on time, and he liked to go, and he liked to organize. He's a great organizer and a hard worker. He doesn't organize anything that he's not going to work in.
He certainly is well respected by everyone.
Yes, he is.
Now, who were some of the other influential people at that time that first started getting things going there?
Well, I have to admit, my mother was one, and she was Mary Arlene Carroll Moore. She was a Carroll. And she was another person who was very active in getting things going and was instrumental in starting a lot of clubs and getting things organized. And I think I took a little bit after her,
It's always nice to have a good role model.
How about that? I agree.
In fact, let me backtrack a little bit. I'm sure I'll come back to education and things. I'm certainly going to be talking about the early things of civil rights back in the 50s and the 60s and whatnot. But before we get into that, let me backtrack. Let's get you to think about as a little girl again, and sort of life in the county. Because I don't want to get past that and the importance of family and all of these things. Can you describe your family? What do you remember of your family as a little girl?
As a little girl, my family was a very closely knit family. We, my mother would see that we got something to eat if she didn't. You know, that kind of a mother. And she was very, as I said, she was very active in PTAs and stuff like that when I was a little girl. And to tell you a little bit more about my mother, when we came up, this was a segregated county. Schools were white and black. Well, they really weren't white and black. They were white and colored. There was no such thing as black then. And my mother was instrumental in seeing that the school, colored children only could go to the 7th grade. And my mother was instrumental in seeing that I went farther than that. I had to go to Baltimore to go to junior high school. And my mother paid. Of course, I stayed with my aunt, and you had to live there. So I stayed there the whole time I was going to junior high school. I went to Booker T. Washington Junior High School. Then the senior high, I went to Lakeland, which is just outside of College Park. And my mother paid for me to stay there, my sister and I to stay there. I went to Booker T by myself. But my older sister went to Catonsville High School, and my mother paid for her to go there. Then after my older sister went to Catonsville to high school, then she sent us to these other schools. But she was determined that we would get an education beyond the 7th grade. And of course, I felt the same way about my son.
Can I just stop you a second? I'm going to ask you
Sure.
about that again, getting an education beyond the 7th grade. I'm going to get these people to be quiet next door. Is that where it's coming from? Yeah, I'm afraid so. I'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it's on the floor, doesn't it?
What do? Cut it off when he has to go?
Well, this was originally a classroom, so it really wasn't built for studios.
No, I mean when he goes out of the room, do you have to cut it off or what?
Usually we
Are you taping now what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
we have nobody in the control room right now, so we're just running it straight through. There's nothing over that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just reset it up again.
Yeah, because you do hear banging in the background.
Yeah, we're not sure they'll pick up on the mic, but just want to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
As a cameraman, can I ask you a favor?
Sure.
Move side to side all you want, but if I could you watch moving forward? I know it's really hard to think about when you're on, but
Stop. Just
watch moving forward. Like
oh,
moving forward.
do not. You're saying do not move forward.
If you can think of it.
Oh, okay.
'Cause
Okay.
that throws you out of focus.
Yeah, because sometimes
Yeah,
you get sort of carried away.
I know.
Okay, I'll try to sit still.
Thanks. It makes you look real good.
Really.
We decided to rip up the floor over there today, so bad timing. Okay, we were talking about education and the difficulties.
In childhood days.
Yeah. Tell me about why was it that the black children were only expected to go to the 7th grade?
That is a good question. I never have figured that out myself. But that was that was as far as we could go. And we also got books handed down from the white schools, from the white children. And I imagine desks and everything else was handed down. When they got new books in the white schools, and the black children got the old books. But I've never figured that out. And we did not have a high school until Silas Craft came in the county. He was hired to serve as principal in the first black high school in Howard County, which was in Cooksville, and it was just a little school. It was an elementary school, I think, to start. And he became the principal of that. Then we started working for Harriet Tubman, and we did all kinds of programs and activities and did a lot of, not exactly fighting, but let's say, I guess it was fighting too for the school. And we finally got it. And we worked very hard. In fact, for the countywide PTA, we used to meet there. And I also served as president of that. Mm-hmm.
Let me get you to talk a little bit more about when you were in school. What do you remember as your early days in elementary school?
In elementary school, that is a great subject. We had some of the toughest teachers in the world. They made you learn. I was telling someone the other day, I said, when I was in elementary school, and I remember Mrs. Lorraine Arthur had the first, second, and third grade. Mrs. Alice Green had fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. Well, because there were only about 8, 10 children in each grade at that time, you know. And I remember they made you learn. Also, even in Sunday school, I remember most of the Bible, I know today, chapters, I learned in Sunday school. You had to learn, memorize history, geography. You had to memorize those things. And I think that's a big help today, the reason why a number of us know a lot about history and geography and the Bible, because we were taught it and we had to learn it, had to memorize it.
What were the physical features of your early elementary school?
Well, I said you had to learn it. And you had to learn it by maybe a switch out off of the tree outside. And but of course that would be child abuse now, you know. It wasn't child abuse then, but it would be now. And but of course, and then we had to walk to school. We had to walk 2 miles to school. And sometimes I'd get to school and my fingers would be so cold. In fact, I think right today my fingers will get, they were frostbitten, I'm sure, way back there then. And so that now sometimes my fingers feel like they are, you know, if it's cold, feel like they're frostbitten.
What did the building look like, inside and out?
Well, the building is still up where I went to school. It's on the corner of Mission Road and Route 32. And it is a 3-room building. As I said, one room had first, second, and third grade, and the other room had fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. And the room out front was called an industrial room, where the kids could go in there and make things, baskets and things like that we could go make. So it was only a 2-classroom with an industrial room, which was a 3-room building. And it's still there. It's an apartment building now. It's amazing. It looks like it ought to be torn down, but it's still there.
Is it brick or wood or?
It's wood. Oh, yeah.
Take a look at that.
I think you should. I will. I think you should. It's on the corner of Mission Road and Guilford Road, which is Route 32, the old Route 32. Mm-hmm.
And you say it's apartments now?
It's apartments now, yeah. There are 3 apartments in there.
3 separate rooms at the school?
That's right. They could make it into apartments. Because the rooms were good size, and they had closets. And
Now you grew up in Guilford.
I grew up in Guilford.
What was Guilford like at that time? What did the neighborhood look like? What sort of layout?
The neighborhood is almost like it is now. In fact, the house that I was a little girl that moved out at 10 years old is still there. But they have sort of modernized it, you know, because there wasn't a bathroom in it then. And they have modernized it, and it looks similar to what it did when I was growing up there.
Tell me about the modern conveniences or lack thereof in the house when you were growing up.
When I grew up, there was no plumbing whatsoever, no electricity whatsoever. Remember, that was, you can cut this part out 60 years ago. As I said, we did not have, and of course my father had a car, but it was an old car, and half the time he worked in Virginia, and he had to go there, and he would only come on weekends. And because we had our own chickens and our own pigs and things like that, so that we were never hungry. And I was telling someone today that my mother used to cook cabbage and potatoes and green beans and potatoes and, you know, these things out of the garden. And lima beans. I used to love dried lima beans.
So you had a garden?
I didn't care anything for soup beans, but I loved lima beans. So yes, we had garden, and we had pig, and we had chickens.
How much of your food did you grow on the land then?
Quite a bit. And what we didn't grow, the neighbors did. Everybody had gardens. Where we may have had a little garden, somebody else had a bigger garden, you know. And it was really very interesting. And people were very, very good to each other. It wasn't a completely segregated community. It was, we had both. We had white and black in the community where I live. And there are still white and blacks in that community, in that area.
How did That's unique. How did everybody get along way back then?
Everybody got along fine. Everybody paid attention to mind their own business and helped each other. You know, if you grew a garden of cabbage, you sent them around and gave them to your neighbors. Neighbors were much different then than they are now. Altogether different. You don't even know your next door neighbor now. But in those days you did. Everybody was your neighbor. If my mother, if a neighbor saw me doing wrong and that neighbor wanted to spank me, that neighbor could do so. My mother would let that neighbor do it because she figured that I was the one that was in fault, not the neighbor.
Let me get back to that subject of discipline in just a minute, but you just said how you felt that neighbors sort of aren't like neighbors used to be in the old days. Why do you think that is? What's changed?
I don't know. As I said, your next door neighbor doesn't even know who you are nowadays. Some of them do, you know, but most of them don't. I think they don't want to get involved. Sometimes, you know, things can happen and people can see them happening, but they don't want to get involved. You know, you could go along the road and see a man beating up a woman beating up a man. People keep getting up. They don't want to be involved.
Why were people so eager to get involved?
I don't know. Everybody was family. Everybody was family then. They were. And it's amazing how closely people reacted to each other, you know, their problems, and they would assist you in any way they possibly could.
Now you say in the area of Guilford, which was not really segregated, was that true between the whites and the blacks as well?
Yes, I have to admit that they were also. And I remember a lot of the whites had big farms, and a lot of the blacks would work, you know, over on their farms and pick beans and tomatoes and things like that. And they would give you some. I remember eating more strawberries than I put in the box. Love strawberries. I did. I really did. And I remember one girl, when I got to the end of the row, I didn't have any strawberries in my box, and she filled it with hers to help me out, you know.
Let me ask you, I think it's going to be a rather contrasting question after what you've just told me about the area of Guilford. Were things like you describe in Guilford, were they like that just down the road in Savage? What do you know about Savage?
Well, that's another story. My mother's doctor delivered most of her children, and he lived in Savage. I remember my mother used to wash for people in Savage, and I remember how we used to take the clothes over to them. And half the time, I've always had a lot of nerve. And if I told you some of the things that I've gone through with my nerve, you'd think I was really crazy. But anyway, we would go over there and take the clothes, and they really weren't too bad. And people would say, they'll stone you, you know, the Ku Klux Klan and all of these things are over in Savage. But they really, well, we didn't, you know, tarry in there. We would go in and take what we were supposed to take to the laundry or something like that and get out. But and there was a lawyer there, and there were a number of people there that we didn't have really any problem. Other people did, but we didn't. My family didn't.
You think
really.
It's just a matter of luck or what? Why didn't you think you had any problem?
Well, we'd go in and mind our own business and come out. And I think that was one of the reasons. And for instance, if anybody made any kind of remark, we just kept getting up, we'd get in there and get out as soon as we could. Speaking of Savage, I remember some time ago when Senator Clark he wasn't a senator then, he was a delegate, and Dr. Shipley, I probably shouldn't call him name, but anyway, Dr. Shipley was a great man. He was my family doctor, my mother's doctor, and as I said, he delivered most all of her children. And I remember we went to Annapolis about civil rights. Of course, that was I think that must have been in the 60s though. And could have been before then. So we went down there about civil rights, and I remember Reverend Art and Reverend Holland is dead now. Reverend Holland and I went in, and Senator Clark often speaks about this. We went in to ask them to come up with some kind of legislation for civil rights. And I remember Senator Clark going out, getting us some soda, telling us to sit down, and the Senator Shipley never did. But Senator Clark did. He was a very understanding person.
Oh.
In fact, he was the one that appointed me to the school board, to the college board.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Board of Trustees.
Let me again get back to your home life when you were a child. You said you had no plumbing. What did you do for?
What do you mean what we do? We had a little outhouse. We had what did we call them then? Anyway, we called them outhouse. They would call something else at that time, I think, but we called them little outhouse. And that's where we went. And of course, at night times we had our little containers in the bedroom, and of course in the mornings we would take them out to the little outhouse. But that's the way it was then. And we had lamps. We didn't have electricity, we had lamps.
Oil lamps?
Oil lamps, yes. Mm-hmm.
How about water supply?
We had a well. You had to bring in your water. And as I said, we had a well. We had buckets. And my brothers would bring in the water and make sure that we had buckets of water every night and to wash dishes and cook and things like that. But we've always had a well. A well and a spring. A spring was it was also a well without a top, but we used to call it a spring. Mm-hmm.
Yes, nothing like good soft spring water.
Oh, you know about it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good.
Sure do.
Good.
Sure do.
Good.
Oh, I know what I wanted to ask about. You had what, 9 brothers and sisters?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Must have been some chores.
I was the 10th person. I mean, to us has to do because we only had so many rooms. We had one bedroom for the girls and one bedroom for the boys in the house until we moved from there. And then I remember we moved down on Route 1 in a huge house. And we had lots of rooms in that house.
So there weren't too many chores to do then.
Mm-mm.
Let's see. Well, we've talked about that. When you were kids, you certainly had your own baseball team.
Well, that's right.
What did y'all do for fun?
Go to church and school. But all the neighbors' children would come over and play, and my brother would shoot marbles with them, you know. We always had plenty of ground. My brothers, they loved shooting marbles. That's what they would do. And, of course, we didn't have too many things to play with because we had such a big family. And a lot of times we didn't get too many things at Christmas because there were too many of us. But I remember, speaking about Dr. Shipley, I remember their family used to always send a box of things over for us for Christmas. So there was a lot of good things that he did do, you know. Mm-hmm.
Nice gesture.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your parents. What did your father do?
My father, towards the end, worked on a state road. Well, in fact, he retired off of the state road. My mother never worked at all. But all of us...
Well, she probably wouldn't...
She couldn't work. She was working, having children, you know.
That's work.
Indeed it is work, and I mean hard work.
You say that she didn't work.
Yeah,
boy.
she'd probably be less than me. Yeah, she really did work.
I bet.
Yeah, because she had to wash and iron all of our clothes, and they ironed them. And my mother made a lot of our clothes for us, so she really, you know, she didn't have time to go out. And of course she did do washing and ironing for people. You know, they brought the clothes to the house, and she did wash and iron.
Did she make your clothes?
Yes, Mother made a lot of our clothes. She would make our dresses, and when Children's Day at church came along, we were little children, Mom made all of our dresses. Mm-hmm. And some shirts.
I think I remember you saying something that she used some sort of odd material around it to make things for you.
Oh yes, whatever she could get, she made things out of. And I mean, we would have get sacks of flour. my mother would make us slips out of it, you know. She was really very artistic when it came down to making things out of nothing. She could do that. Made the best rolls and biscuits in the world.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Did she give you the recipe?
Yes and no, because half the time she didn't know what she put in them. A little bit of this and a little bit of that, you know, that's the way they cooked way back there then. They didn't have recipes. And what they put in it really tasted good.
Something just slipped my mind. Oh, I know, about the clothing. You said flour sacks and things.
Mm-hmm.
Other children in the neighborhood, were they clothed the same way?
Most of them were, well, my mother would make dresses for a lot of the kids. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
You're right. So I guess I made a mistake when I said she didn't work. Because she did work by making clothes and doing all these things for people. And whenever you came to my mother's house, you could eat. She had more stragglers that come around there to eat than you want to count. They knew they could eat, you know, so they would come.
What else did your father do before you say you retired from state roads? What did he do before that?
He used to drive a truck. When I was a little girl, he drove a truck, and then as I got a little bit older, he started working on the state road. Because he worked on the state road for years and years.
How about the whatever food and clothing you did not have provided for you there at home that you had to go shopping for? Where would you go for food and clothing? Let me ask about food specifically first. Where would you do that?
Laurel. My mother would go to Laurel because that was the closest store, Laurel. And also my mother washed for tailors in Ellicott City, and that's where she would buy our clothes. And she would wash and iron to pay for them. I never will forget, she bought me a pair of shoes at Taylor's one time, and they were really too small, but I wore them anyway because I wasn't sure I was going to get another pair. And that was not true. These new shoes, you know.
It's hard to convince a little girl.
Right.
Truth is. Okay, so you pretty much had your clothing taken care of from Ellicott City and the food from Laurel.
Right.
Tell me about
there was a store in Savage also. There was a store on Route 1. That's not there anymore, but there was a store there. Mrs. Carter had a store in Laurel, and a little later she had a store in Guilford, Store Carter. In fact, the building is still there. It's no store, but the building is still there, and so is her house.
Are you talking about Dora Mac Carter?
Dora Mac Carter, yes. Too bad you couldn't have interviewed her.
Do you remember Dora Mac Carter?
Of course I do.
Tell me about Dora.
She was my cousin.
Tell me about her.
She started a lot of things. She was a music teacher. She trained a lot of people. In fact, one of them was my sister that she trained, gave music lessons to. She used to drive a horse and buggy to Laurel and Merkirk and give lessons to people there. She went to School of Music in Baltimore, and she was really, and I think she was the first black teacher, I think, in Howard County in the Guilford area. Not in Howard County, but in the Guilford area. I don't think she had high school education or anything then, but she did teach school until they, got somebody else that had a little more education. But that she was, and then she had the store, and she had a studio, and she just had all kinds of things, really. Very, very hard-working woman. Mm-hmm.
Well, she sounds very unusual for a fellow.
Yes. As I said, she had a grocery store, she had a music place where she gave music, studio she called it, her studio, and she had an electric organ and a piano in it. And then, as I said, she had this grocery store, and she had that for years and years and years until she just couldn't handle it any longer because she was 98 when she died.
Now, did she do all this by herself?
Not in the beginning because she had a husband. But then after he passed, she still kept up the store. It was amazing how that woman, what she did, what she went through. And I remember when I first got married, we lived on her property because she had a house down below the store. And my husband and I lived there for a while until we built our own house.
When did she pass?
I guess about 5 years ago, I guess.
Oh, is that all?
Uh-huh. It's been very long.
Oh, that is a shame.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't meet her because so many people have told me about her.
Mm-hmm.
And she sounds like such a very out of the ordinary individual for her time.
She really was. She certainly was.
So she was your
Cousin.
cousin?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, there's a Christian center named after her, is it not?
That's right.
Can you tell
That used to be, yes, that was our third church. And that building, my husband was instrumental in the church buying that property that building is on now because it belonged to his sister, my husband's sister, my sister-in-law. And my husband was instrumental in seeing that the church got this land so that it could build that building. That was our third church. And so then after we built the large one that we're in now, we named that the Doormat Carter Christian Center. And that was a church.
Tell me, you were talking before about activities that would take place at the church. Can you remember as a youngster what kind of activities there were for both young and old that the church would sponsor?
Well, dinners or suppers. We used to call them suppers then. Suppers or dinners or whatever you want to call them. And the church school would have Children's Day programs and things like that. And the men would have a box social. The wives would cook, make a box of food, and the husbands would buy them. And everybody would sit down and eat together. And that's really most of the things they had. And they had clubs. In fact, there was a Women's Willing Workers Club, and that's still in existence now, and I'm the secretary to that. And the Men's Willing Workers Club, that went out of existence. They don't have that anymore. But those were some of the things that we did when we were young.
So that
Children's Day was the big thing for the children.
Oh, tell me about Children's Day.
Children's Day was a Sunday that they had 2 services. And the children would get the parents would dress them up so pretty for Children's Day, and they would have 2 services, one at about 11 o'clock and another one at 3 o'clock, because we always have had a huge Sunday school. And then we would have refreshments in between the services, and that was a big day for the children. They would recite, they would sing, and they would do things like that. And Mrs. Carter was the directress. She was superintendent for about 50 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Do they still have Children's Day?
No, they don't have Children's Day anymore.
Why do you-
They have Promotion Day, wherein the children are promoted from one grade to the other. And they have that, but they don't have Children's Day. Right, that they're there.
Support for that.
But they have a number of things going on there now for young people. Young adult classes and this, and young adult choirs and young adult usher board, and the YPC is a young people's choir, and they're from about 3 years on up to 10 years, and they sing on the choir. In fact, they sang last Sunday morning.
So a box social is when I've always heard of a box social, but I've never known what that meant, what it was. So that meant
That's what it is. They fix a box of food. They would have maybe chicken and potato salad and rolls and cake and maybe something to drink. No, they always had something to drink at the building, but they would have food in the box. Very interesting.
And they'd sort of trade them off or something?
Most of the time, they would be for sale, but most of the time, the husbands or the boyfriends wanted to buy their own wives, and sometimes they would say, well, let's get somebody else's box this time, You didn't know what was in the box. Mm-hmm.
That was my next question. Were the
Right.
boxes labeled? Or?
No, you didn't know what was in the box.
So how
The only person knew what was in the box was the one that bought the box.
So how would the husband be sure if he wanted to buy his own wife's box? How would he be sure to get it?
Well, he would see what color the box was and all before he left home.
In other words, he'd cheat.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's good testimonial too. As well.
Right, right.
That's good.
That's true.
How about your mother? What kind of a woman was she?
Very religious woman. In fact, my mother was a minister. And it was so funny, though, when we were all little children. My mother married my father, and she moved from Asbury to Guilford with my father. She got all of us in the Guilford Baptist Church. And then my mother goes back to Asbury and starting preaching. And one sister went to Asbury with her, because by that time Asbury had sort of gotten small, and she went back to sort of build it up. And she had new walls put in, and she had a lot of things done to the Asbury Methodist Church, and those walls are still there. And my mother's been dead now for 20 years. Mm-hmm.
So did she ever preach at Guilford?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then how long did she preach at Guilford before going back to Asbury?
Oh, well, she didn't preach at Guilford when she was a member there. She didn't start preaching until she went back to Asbury.
Oh, I see.
And then she came back and preached at Guilford, because she was down in Asbury for years and years and years.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that, so there are always, I guess my point here is that female ministers are nothing new.
That's right. That's exactly right. I understand that there were a few back there in the Bible. They didn't call them ministers, but they were back there then. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember if there were other women ministers at the time that your mother was preaching?
Yes, there were some. Not a whole lot, but there were some. Yeah.
And they were readily accepted among the male congregation?
Of course not. Are you kidding? No, they were not readily accepted, because I know one woman today who has a church in Ellicott City, and I remember her going to one church in Howard County, and she had to preach from the floor, not from the pulpit. So they were not readily accepted. They are now, years later, but in the very beginning, no. Mm-mm.
Mother didn't have that problem.
She was not ordained in the church in the Baptist church where I am now. She was not ordained until she went back to the Methodist church and went through another church to be ordained.
I see.
Since then, we have ordained ministers.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about discipline in the community, about how a neighbor sort of setting you straight if they felt that obviously it was their duty to the community.
That's
and
right.
Perhaps to your parents
That's
as well.
true.
But within your family, who was the disciplinarian?
My mother. And my father would sort of take care of the boys, and my mother would take care of the girls, go out there and break a stick and bring in a stick, and of course the stick that I brought in would be a stick that would break the minute you look at it, and that wasn't the right kind of stick, She'd go and get the right kind of stick. And they were sticks,
Was she strict?
Yes, my mother was pretty strict. She really was.
In what way? What would you make it?
And making you, she had her rules and regulations, and you went by them, or else you got to stick. Yeah. I got them a lot of times. A lot of times I got to stick.
Were you naughty? Were you a naughty girl?
Yeah, I wanted to sort of have my own way sometime. You too, I'm sure.
Nothing's changed, right?
Right. Right.
Today we call it character.
That's right. That's true.
When you're 7 years
And so
old,
you're tough,
he's
right.
a rebel, but
Isn't that the
when
truth?
you're 47, it's character.
That's right. What they say.
You remember hog killing time?
Of course.
Tell me about it.
I didn't see too many hogs being killed, but I did see some of them after they were killed, and they would hang them up in the building, like they would call it the meat house, and they would hang them up in the meat house, and they would leave them there. They would kill them cold weather, and they would leave them up there. And my mother was an expert person to cut up a pig. She could cut them up. My father couldn't, but my mother could cut chops, steaks, and she was just the jack of all trades, you know. But she could do that, but my father couldn't. But I do remember the hog killing. Mm-hmm. And my mother could kill a chicken and run one down. She could run a chicken down and grab him and kill him. That was some good eating then, too.
There were chickens in the yard?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
It seems that hog killing time was sort of a community thing. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. 4 or 5 farmers or families would kill at the same time. Mm-hmm.
And they'd all sort of help each other.
That's right. They'd help each other. Right.
I see.
Very interesting.
It is.
It was. Mm-hmm.
It really is. Yeah. Get the cough? Go ahead. Yeah, everybody seems to remember that. So, I could see that. Oh, who did the cooking in the house?
Which house?
When you
My
were
mother's
little?
house? Oh, my mother. I don't think my father knew how to cook anything. Until after my mother was almost ready to die, then he could cook himself a couple of eggs, and my mother would make coffee, and he'd keep adding water to it for a week if necessary. My mother couldn't make the second fresh pot. But he had gotten to the point where he could cook a couple of eggs for himself in the morning. But he was not a cook. My mother did all the cooking.
Do you remember any kind of special things that she made?
Oh, everything that she made was special. Mm. She was a good, she could make the best rolls, and she could make the best cake, and she could make good biscuits, and fried chicken. Oh, boy. Almost everything my mother cooked was just super. She was especially a very good cook. Gingerbread, oh, she'd make the best gingerbread. Haven't tasted gingerbread like that since she died.
I think you said before something about corn fritters, corn.
Cornbread. She used to make good cornbread. She used to make very, very good cornbread.
That's it.
Yeah. I haven't had cornbread like that in years.
That's it. I love cornbread.
I do too.
Wonderful place in Boston that has wonderful cornbread. I get it every time I go to Boston.
Good for you.
Oh, great stuff. Great stuff.
It really is.
Been there for over 100 years.
It really
They
is.
still make cornbread. It was the way they did 100 years ago. Now, you said as a child you attended school, well, as an adolescent, you attended school in Baltimore for junior high school, right?
Right.
Okay. And so you
And
went
Lakeland Senior High.
Lakeland Senior High, okay.
Mhm.
And you stayed with...
My aunt in Baltimore, and stayed with another lady in Lakeland. And of course, my mother paid for us to stay there. And we
Was I
came
gonna
home
say-
on weekends.
Yeah, I was going to say, because how do you attend a Baltimore school without a Baltimore address?
I had to have a Baltimore address. I stayed with my aunt in Baltimore. You had to have a Baltimore address. You had to live there in order to go there. And that's what we did. That's what I did, rather.
What did the children do who wanted to attend secondary school from Howard County? You didn't have-
They walked to Route 1 and got a bus to Lakeland High School, like Roger Carter, my nephew Merrill Green, several others, Wesley Kelly, and a number of them walked to Route 1 unless they could catch a ride and get a bus to Lakeland High School. That's how they went to school. Until Silas Craft came into the county and they opened a little high school in Cooksville. And that's where my baby sister went, there.
What was the name of that high school in Cooksville?
Cooksville High School.
Cooksville High School.
Hmm.
That was before the days of Tubman.
Yes. Yes.
Tell me about the fight for Harry at Tubman High School.
Oh, well, it really wasn't a big fight because they knew then that it was time to have a high school other than the little one that they had at Cooksville, which was not big enough. And so I don't think we had a problem trying to get it then. We should have worked on this years before, when I had to walk to Route 1 to get a bus to Lakeland. We should have been working on that then. But that's the way it was in those days, and people accepted it as it was. It's just when some of us got adolescents that we were the ones that fight. I mean, been out in Chicago and all around in picket lines and stuff like that. And on Route 40.
Are you a member of the Howard County branch of the NAACP?
I'm a life member.
Life member. When did you join?
Oh, I joined we were organized in 44. I joined then. And I've been a member ever since. I haven't been a life member ever since. I was a regular member up until about the last, I guess, 15 years I've been a life member.
Can you tell me, what were some of the early issues and struggles that the county branch of the NAACP dealt with?
One of the main one was integrating restaurants on Route 40. We walked up and down in every restaurant on Route 40. And I remember one manager saying to me, "We do not serve colored, and we will never serve colored. There's a restaurant up near Baltimore that you can go to." So I remember Reverend Holland saying, "You may not serve us now, but we will be back." And sure enough, we did go back. And I remember Dorothy Kraft, Silas Kraft's wife, and I, and Alma Laurienti, which was a real white friend of mine. I guess you know her. The three of us went to the restaurant. And the same manager, when we left, he said, "I hope you ladies enjoyed your lunch. Come back again." That was really something. But we had to really fight. In fact, I was on the Interracial Commission at the time, and we had, there was about 6 of us on the Interracial Commission, and we had to go to Baltimore to the state Interracial Commission at that time, and my husband was a plaintiff, and so we got them to come out and tell the county that this was a law now, that restaurants are public places are supposed to integrate. And that's how we got to go in there. So, of course, we were the ones to try it out and see if it worked. Tell you my nerve. And it worked, because the manager certainly did say that.
You were the test case.
Mm-hmm.
How about, now I'm told that there were signs at the courthouse that said...
Oh, yes, colored. Everywhere you went, there were signs that said colored. I remember going down to my doctor in Laurel, and there was a little room that had colored, and of course there was another room that had white. And I started going into the colored for a while. Then I thought, I'm not going in there anymore. My husband went with me. He would be sitting up in the colored, and I would be sitting up in the white. That's what we did. That's how you meet my nerve. So there I was sitting up in there, and I expected them to come tell me to leave any time, but they didn't. They did not. Yeah, colored and white signs, even in a doctor's office. But that's the way it was back there then.
It's so hard for me.
I know you cannot comprehend such a thing ever taking place.
No.
But that's what we did.
Yes.
Excuse me, you've got about 55 minutes on your tape.
Thank you very much. I'm going to change
We're
that.
taking off when we're on the Viking hearing tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me change that tape, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
I want to talk some more about this.
Oh, okay.
You tell them.
How, right.
I mean, if you didn't fire
But
me,
why did he even have to use that word?
I have no idea. But I know that place paid for it because I heard from here.
We had sold 500 tickets for that place, and so when we changed it to Fort Meade, we were talking about this.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, and Liz Bobo, a lot of the council have changed their places of having things, and
That's going to hurt them a great deal.
Oh,
School
yes.
has changed.
I know the school has
Yeah,
changed.
school. That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've had a couple of things scheduled there because we've done a few things there in the past, and we've had a couple of things scheduled there.
I think that was kind of stupid. That was kind of dumb even.
Well, they've always been kind of, my own opinion, but they've always been sort of snobby.
Especially that one guy.
Silly way anyway, you know. They're always kind of
He's
silly
dumb.
place. I've never really liked it up there. Food stinks anyway. Really, I mean, serve them right.
You don't have me on. You don't have me
We're
on.
on tape now.
Oh well.
That's right. I'm on
We gotta be careful.
Oh, well, you're the last person to be afraid of what you're going to say. I
Yes,
know
but you told me that he was going to, cut out what he didn't want
Well, I
to.
won't use that part. It's just our opinion.
I don't know.
Change our opinion.
This editorial.
That's right.
All right.
But we were talking before. I want to get back to that again. We were talking before about signs, and it's so hard for me. I moved here in 1968, so I've been here for 20 years, and my understanding was that the signs at the courthouse for restroom facilities and I don't know, water fountains or whatever were removed in 1964. Now, I mean, that's just 4 years before I came here, so it's certainly within my my lifetime and everything. But having never seen it, but not even only just seeing it, but having been on the experiential end of it, is just something that I find so hard to fathom.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, for instance, my grandchildren, if I told them that, they wouldn't believe that. They would think that their grandmother was making something up if I told them that there were such signs in the county. Well, I remember we always had segregated PTA council. As I told you, we had the county-wide PTA, and then we had a PTA council in the county. Well, it was called Howard County PTA, too. So until we integrated the PTAs, the county PTAs, also we all had a segregated state PTA. Like the Maryland Congress of PTA, we had the Colored Congress of Parents and Teachers Association, and at that time I was vice president to president, and we integrated the Colored Congress of Parents and Teachers to the Maryland Congress of Parents and Teachers at that time. And there have been, at that time, there was a lot of discrimination and segregation in the county as well as state and national. Even the national PTA, I remember going down to Atlanta. Should I tell this? Well, anyway, I was going to Atlanta to a National Congress of Colored Parents and Teachers Association, and I was on a train, and they had told me that I would get there, left 2 o'clock in the morning, said I'd get there at 11. Well, I thought they meant 11 o'clock in the day. This was 11 o'clock at night. So on the way down there on this train, sort of not a real train, I guess, it was probably one of these sort of local kind of things that went a long ways. And I remember getting on this train, and there was a lady on the train. When we got to the stopping place, there wasn't any food on the train at that time. Got to the stopping place, and there was a big sign out there on the building that said, on the lunch place that said colored, and on the side was white. So I sat on the train. I did not get off, and this white lady got off of the train, and everybody else just about got off the train except me. And she came back on the train with a sandwich and something to drink for me. And she said, "You didn't look like the kind of lady that would get off to go in that dirty place that has colored on it." So honestly, some people are very, very nice. And I said, "You are so right." And she said, "So I brought you back some lunch." Well, I mean, that was unusual, So, and when I got to Atlanta, at 11 o'clock at night, and I thought, oh my God, I'm down here by myself at 11 o'clock at night. And when I got off the train, though, there was a black guy there with a cab and his girlfriend. And I asked him would they take me over to the college where I was going to a meeting, a national meeting. And so they did. So I have gone through a lot of discrimination and segregation.
When was that incident?
That was back in I guess that was probably early 60s, 60s, 70s, 80, almost 90 now. So that was back in the early 60s or late 50s.
Now, what about some of the other, sort sort of local struggles and incidences that the county NAACP took a stand on. Was there anything, let's say, with housing or anything like that?
Yes, slightly. For instance, when Guilford Gardens opened up and they had on the first floor was only for real handicapped people, and we wanted this lady to get in there. They said they only had room for on the second floor. Well, we wanted on the first floor, so the NAACP did get into that, which it really wasn't a hard job, but they did get into that. They have gotten into a number of things, and I just, can't remember all of them. Some of them they didn't have to get into because, for instance, we did not have any black machine judges at election in the county. I was the first black machine judge. They did not have any black book judges. I was the first black book judge in the county. So we didn't have to fight for that. Some of the elected people just said, would you like to serve? And I said, yes, I don't mind being the first one or anything. So that worked out pretty good. But we have had a number of cases since then. For instance, Ter Valley. We've had a number of, I can't even begin to enumerate them all.
How come they came to you to be the first to do so many of these things?
Well, I was very active in the Republican Party at that time, and in fact, I was the first woman vice chairman of the Republican Central Committee, first black one of the Republican Central Committee, and so I had been working in the party at that time, very much so. So that's one of the reasons they thought that I would be, have the nerve to do it. And of all places, Savage.
Is that right?
Yeah.
How unusual. What a turnaround.
Right.
How have blacks been politically in this county? How active have they been?
They have always been active, really. They were more active in the Republican Party at that time than they were in the Democratic Party, because the Republicans were the ones that gave you jobs. If you worked at the polls, they would pay you and things like that. That's one of the reasons why. In fact, it was some time before a black person even was elected on the Democratic slate for the Central Committee. And that has just been, I think, since Columbia has been here, because they were none active in the Democratic Party before then. So that is really one of the reasons why that that I was first to this and first to that, was because I was working in the Republican Party.
Yeah, I've talked with a number of people, and they all said that they were all associated with the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still that way?
No, it's not like that anymore.
What
No.
happened to turn it around?
A number of people are, let's say maybe presidents turned a lot of people around.
Any two in particular?
No, I'm not going to say.
I know.
I like that.
One sort of positive and one sort of...
Right. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah. I like your style.
Thank you. I think I like yours too.
So we really have come along. I talked to a group not too long ago, the senior advocates over at the Bain Center, doing Black History Month, and I talked about growing up in Howard County now and then, how it is now to what it was then when I grew up. And it's a lot of changes have taken place.
How has Columbia changed this county for blacks?
Very good, because when Rouse came into the county, he said, we will not have any discrimination. In fact, there was one builder that came in the county, wanted to exclude blacks, and he would not accept him. So Rouse really, he came in with the idea that all men are created equal. And I think that's my philosophy in life. All men are created equal. and women. I had to add women in there. But that's the part about Ross that I liked very much. There's no discrimination in his bones.
How did, since you've been here all your life, how did the folks who were here before Columbia came, we were sort of a rural area here, how did they see the influx of Columbia?
They hated it. A lot of people disliked it. Because, and do you know there are a number of people that are very concerned now because they feel like Columbia gets everything and some outskirts of the county, I'm not even going to say what particular part of the county, they figure that they are not getting what Columbia's getting. But I don't feel like that, but they do. A lot of people do. No.
How about in the way of not just opportunities, but the kind of people all people that Columbia has attracted? Has that been good for the county's black population?
I think so. I think that a number of people have come into the county. We've always had people in the county that have we have always had doctors and blacks with degrees, but of course as Columbia progresses, we have more and more and more. You know, more. We've always had people in the education field. We've always had loads of school teachers and not a lot of lawyers or doctors, but we have more and more now. Of course, they were in like Baltimore City, but not in Howard County. So it really has. I think Columbia has made a dent in the county as far as professional people are concerned.
What was it specifically about Columbia that sort of the old folks at home were afraid of?
That they would lose a lot. That Columbia's coming in, taking over all of Howard County, taking over their property, taking over their this and taking over their that. And they were afraid of that. Well, because Columbia did take a lot of property. All of this land all around in here belonged to somebody, you know. And it was all farmland. And now it isn't. The only farmland now is up in the west end of the county. And some of them up there think that Howard County's trying to take, Columbia's trying to take over, you know, the land up there.
I know what I wanted to ask about. Do you remember the Depression years?
Slightly. I was a child. I was little then, and I don't remember too much about it because, as I said in the very beginning, that my mother always had big pots of cabbage and potatoes and things like that, and she made her own bread, and so we were always, you know, always got plenty of bread and plenty of food. So we didn't have, and if she had problems, we didn't know about it, you know. That's the way parents were then. You know, they didn't tell the children anything that was going on. You had to sort of halfway figure it out yourself. And as long as you got food and clothes, you thought everything was fine.
Did either your mother or your father or both together sort of instill any kind of philosophy in their children?
Yes, that you weren't better than anybody else. That, and you got to work for what you get. You got to work for it. You can't get things just given to you on a silver platter. You have to work for it, and you have to sweat for it. And anything that you want, go after it, if it's the right thing.
Is that something that should be heeded by children today?
Yes, yes. Go about it in the right way to get what you want. Don't try to take anything that is not yours, and don't steal anything, and don't, you know, go after it in the wrong way. If you want something, go after it in the right way. To me, that's important.
What's your opinion of the future of of black youth from Howard County, what do they have to look forward to? Is it optimistic? Is it pessimistic? And if so, why do you say that?
Well, I think if a lot of black youth would heed to a lot of what the black parents are telling them, I don't think they'll have any problem. But I think the black youth are just like a lot of white youth. They have peer pressure. And they, you're a mother's boy if you don't do this, or you're daddy's girl if you don't do this. And a lot of them can't take it. And so I think the white and black kids both have the same problems, really. Except the blacks are a little bit, I think they have harder problems because they are black. But other than that, I think they both have problems. And peer pressure is the problem. They want them to take drugs, they want them to take alcohol, and they want them to do all these things that they should not do. And the young people nowadays, well, whatever you say I can't do, then that's what I'm going to do. That's what I can do.
In the Howard County of the 1980s and 90s to come, is it still harder to be black than it is to be white?
I don't find it so, but I'm sure that there are people that do find it so. I'm sure of that. Because my job as working for the Office on Aging, I go out and talk to all colors and all groups. And when I go there, I don't feel any different. And sometimes it might be 30 whites and I'm the only black. But as I said, I've come up like that, going to these different places and cities and towns, and a lot of times in the PTA council, I'm the only black sitting up there. And if I could get more interested, I'd feel better, but I'm not going to stop because it's just me.
Now let me rephrase the same question, but to put it 30, 40 years ago. In the Howard County of 30, 40 years ago, was it harder to be black than it was to be white?
I suppose so. I guess I could say yes. Because back there then, a white person could get a job probably quicker than a black person could. But it isn't quite that bad now. At least I don't see it, but there could be some people that say it's the same thing. I don't think so. Because I've progressed myself, and that's the only person I can talk about, You may talk to somebody else and they might have a different opinion.
Yeah, still, it's very much a personal story.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, let's stick to your personal story then, because that's certainly the one I'm interested in right now. You certainly remember, if not the signs, other things, there were outward signs of discrimination in the past, correct?
Oh, yes.
Would you say that you were aware of that very often in the past, 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Not as much in the county as it was outside of the county. I know in the county I figured that's the way it was. When I was a child, that's the way it was. We didn't have new books. And I figured that's the way it was. When you're a child like that, back then you didn't know any different or any better. Children nowadays are altogether different. If my son didn't get a new book, he'd think something was wrong. Where if I didn't get a new book, I didn't know there were new books in the first place when I was a little child. I didn't know. I thought perhaps it's almost like my mother used to say to me, don't bring any babies in this house. Well, I thought the stork dropped them outside in the yard and you brought them in, That's the way it was. If you didn't know, you didn't know, But that's the way it was,
So you were careful not to pick up any fallen babies.
Right.
And bring them in the house. By the same regard, are there still outward signs of discrimination in the county today? Other than Turf Valley?
Well, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are plenty of still in the county. I don't come in contact with too much of it. I mean, a lot of people even joke about things nowadays. For instance, about a year ago, it was I guess it was about a year ago, over at the office now, this girl, she's always joking with us. And there were two of the white women were standing in the hall talking. And I walked between them. And she said to me, "Don't you know you're not supposed to be walking between two white women?" I said, "What am I supposed to be doing to them as I come through?" But she said, "You know, I'm only joking." And she has to be, no, I could take the joke. But there'd be some people that would not take a joke like that, you know. Would probably be on her neck. But I could take a joke. I knew she was joking because she's always saying something funny, because I make jokes too to her, so.
Yes.
But I'm sure there's still plenty of it around.
Let me ask you about that perspective. To some people, it's such a profound issue with them that discrimination and black-white issues are something that they would never ever joke about, and yet to other people, they're not ignoring the reality of black-white issues, but they can still find a sense of humor about it too.
Mm-hmm.
What's your perspective on it?
Sort of like me, I guess. I can find a little bit of humor about it. Now, my son wouldn't. My son wouldn't think it was very funny, you know, if somebody said that to him, "Don't walk between two white men," you know. He wouldn't think that. He would probably want to know why, and time he got through asking questions and end up in a fight and all that kind of stuff. But not me. You see, I've come up through it, you know. So anybody can make a joke. I can make another joke too, you know. That's the way I am.
I always thought the first person you have to have a sense of humor about it is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can start having a
That's
sense
right.
of humor about the world around you.
That's true. That's true.
It helps to keep everything in
Of
perspective.
course.
You can't leave yourself out of that.
Of course. You have to get involved.
Yeah.
No.
That makes us all a heck of a lot healthier.
Right.
Miss Dorsey, thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
You-
Is there anything you wanted to say that I didn't get to? Is there anything you want to talk about that I didn't get to?
I don't think so. I think you
Cover a little bit of
I think
everything.
you've covered a lot. Yeah.
Did I ask if there were other civil rights issues and whatnot of perhaps the 1960s? Because the 1960s were the most turbulent years when all that started to come
Yes.
about. Were there any other civil rights issues in the 1970s that you found yourself to be a part of?
No, the main ones were when we were on Route 40 trying to get the restaurants open up, and we did accomplish that. So that was really the toughest one that
Do you
we
remember
had.
what restaurants you picketing?
Yes, we did. We picketed all of them. We went in all of them.
What were they?
And we had,
Do you remember
one of them isn't even there anymore. But we stopped and the names have been changed.
Yeah, I guess virtually all of them.
Yeah, they
Was
all have been
Buell's there then?
changed. Buell's was there. Yes, Buell's has been there a long time. And
I can remember.
the restaurant that's on Route 40 and St. John's Lane, what's that called
The one
now?
that's called Vaccarino's now? or
Right.
called Vaccari-
That was,
What was the name of that?
we went in there. That was one. And then there was another one down, that's a little bit, when you go out St. John Lane, it's to the left. And there's a lot of meetings being held there now.
St. John's Lane, which direction from Route 40?
From
South or north?
going towards Frederick, that area. That would be going towards,
Going
towards Ter Valley,
Oh, okay, going up that, on which side?
on the left side.
The Crab House?
Not the Crab House, the one, yeah, I think you'd get to it before.
The
Chaucer,
Inn?
Chaucer,
Cheshire Inn.
that's it, right.
Yes, I remember
That was one of them.
Okay.
And not the Crab Channel, that was the only one I think that,
The old National
that we
Pike
could get
Crab
in.
House is what that was back then.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went in there. And, but that was about the only one. All the rest of the restaurants were segregated.
Oh, blacks were allowed in the Crab House?
Yes.
Oh, good, because that was owned
Yeah.
by a friend of mine's father.
Oh, really?
That's nice to know.
Oh,
Mr. Patel.
Yes,
Owned that place.
Yeah.
With a fellow named Mr. Albater.
I remember, I remember up at Desi's on Route 1. It's not there anymore now.
I think I've heard the name.
Yeah, on Route 1. And I remember going in there the same, no, I'm trying to think, was the same 3 ladies? Yes, we went into Desi, and I remember Mr. Desi was not there, and his wife was there, and she said to us, well, you look like very nice ladies. You're dressed very well, but I'm sorry we can't serve you. And I'm sure that Mr. Desi was glad he was down on Eastern Shore someplace. So then she found out later. She said, I wish I could serve you, but I can't serve you. You know, because you're colored. But she certainly did say, you ladies look very nice, and you're dressed very nice, but we can't serve you.
Amazing.
And after that, we were served. After we got all these places integrated, then we were served.
Victory.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
very, very much. Let me unhook
Okay.
you there.
Oh.
Okay. I think we're in good shape.
We're good. Don't forget to block Ethel out of that.
Well, I promise, we won't use anything that would embarrass you.
Please don't. Thanks a lot.
You'd have to go a long way to embarrass yourself anyway, you know
Oh,
that.
yeah, you would.
That's
You're
right.
I just don't want to hurt anybody.
Make sure we do that. Nobody's gonna get mad at us for doing this.